Hi everyone, this is audap. Let's check out Bright Paw on Nintendo Switch. Act 0 Level 1, Shelter.
Oh, there you are, Theo. Honestly, it's your own dream. Do you even know where you are? Ah well, it's time we got you sorted out with these cards. Come on now, we haven't got all day.
Select a card with left stick, left around the D-pad, and use A to play it.
Oh, sorry about that. Just give that rewind button a tap and we'll see if we can't start walking around things instead of into them.
Press Y to rewind the previous turn.
If you ever find yourself in a pickle, just remember that you can take a step back and try something else. Now, give these a whirl and see where they get you. There you go. Remember, Theo, you can look around at any time. What's that just there? Maybe you should give it a peek.
Press L and use the left stick to move the cursor to a highlighted object and press A to view it. Shelter 1, Odd Cat Box, a strangely familiar but otherwise nondescript box washed up on the shores of Theo's subconscious.
I wonder what that's doing sitting around here. Maybe you should keep your eyes open for other interesting things. You never know what you'll find. Well, we're done here. Go on, leap into your family's arms. Lauren and Nathaniel are waiting.
Act 1, Murder. Act 1, Level 1, Waking Up.
Ah! What was that? Oh, okay. Well. After being woken unceremoniously by a sudden noise, our hero Theo felt that if he was to be kept awake, he deserved to know why.
Let's see, Theo's bed, warm, comforting, and tempting, a reminder of hazy dreams. Joshua's acceptance letter, an acceptance letter for tutelage at a prestigious school, perhaps proof that genius is hereditary.
Although Theo felt the lure of sleep and the comfort of his bed, he really should go and investigate this ruckus.
Nathaniel's recognition. It's always a cause for celebration when genius is recognized. Act 1, Level 2, Disturbance.
Hearing the yelling from the kitchen, Theo wondered if he had really moved from his bed just to listen to some tiff.
See, hastily packed suitcase. The suitcase rapidly filled and suddenly cast aside. Despite the awkward posing, happiness and pride are visible in this photo. No longer tended to or cared for, but grand despite the lack of use.
Perhaps things were a little more serious than he'd thought.
Act 1, Level 3, Bodies.
The kitchen seemed normal. Except, what was that he could see across the room? He had to take a closer look.
Joshua's Travels, a selfie taken by Joshua during his travels after college sent to his parents as a memento. Theo's food bowl, one of Theo's most prized possessions, completely devoid of answers, insight, or food.
God. Theo couldn't believe what he was seeing. His family, motionless on the floor. But that was it. No gun? Nothing at all. Was someone else here?
Joshua and Theo, a young boy and his cat, whoever said dogs are man's best friend, had clearly never seen this photo.
As he turned away, Theo could only think about one thing. Someone was surely responsible for this, and he had to know who.
Act 1, Level 4, Light.
Cautiously examining the hallway, Theo saw no signs of the killer. Instead, he found a path of destruction carved through strange machines before him.
A replaced robot. A strange robot sitting in the front room and falling to pieces. Grandfather clock. Like all household clocks, the rhythmic ticking is a constant reminder of the universe's slow march to entropy. Nathaniel's graduation, the optimism of youth, oblivious to the crushing disappointment of reality after formal education.
The deeper into the room Theo moved, the more he realized that something was amiss. That bright red light hadn't always been there, had it?
Act 2, Chase. Act 2, Level 1, Lasers.
Although he could not shake the image of his departed owners, Theo suddenly found himself somewhere very different indeed. However, before he could appreciate his new surroundings, he found his attention drawn to the glowing hot wall of energy in front of him.
Insecure about a modern and threatening-looking robot rendered immobile and useless.
Faced with something so clearly hazardous, he thought it might be wise to take a moment to think before diving headlong into oblivion. Oh, what a pleasant surprise! After his daring maneuver, Theo found that he was still alive. Unfortunately, there was one more laser to slip past. Theo glared at the broken robot blocking his path. After risking his life twice, he was in no mood for this obstruction. Perhaps that broken vent offered salvation.
Level 2, Janitor.
Still somewhat tense from his previous trial, Theo was immensely relieved to find no deadly lasers when he emerged from the vent. On the other hand, he was instead faced with a functional, frantic, and quite soggy security robot.
A colorful flatfish. A fish who goes by the name Fergus, whose steely gaze wards off even the hungriest of felines. Janitorial bot, a poor custodian spinning their wheels, attempting to clean up after someone else. sea mine advertisement. Need to safeguard your underwater assets. These marvels in explosive technology will quickly demonstrate the meaning of private property.
As he skirted by the distracted machine, Theo found himself eyeing the hole-riddled aquarium. Either someone was stalking the halls shooting at water features, or the security needed to work on their aim. Though the appeal of fresh fish was enticing, it was offset by the risk of an unexpected bath. Rather than contemplate such a terrible fate any further, Theo decided to make a quick exit. Advancing cautiously, Theo was encouraged by the sight of another aquarium, this time with the water safely inside, not threatening to unpleasantly dampen his fur. There was no time to fish, however, as security appeared to be taking its job a touch more seriously.
Stealth alive, not sure. Dead, maybe. Unfazed by the current situation, definitely. Handgun advertisement, reliable, concealable, and effective. A must-have sidearm for the professional henchperson. Comes with a variety of upgrades to fit your style and needs.
Although Theo could be easily distracted, he knew when it was time to focus.
An overt but befitting show of respect to the true superior life on Earth.
That time had arrived. Tearing his attention away from the unattainable, Theo delicately stepped between the broken remains of some very expensive-looking showpieces. Despite his lack of any understanding of fine art, he was disgusted by the wanton destruction before him. Having successfully weaved past the searching eyes of the guard, he was overjoyed to see that he could just follow the killer through a door, instead of crawling through the ventilation like a rodent.
Level 4. Active level 4 welcome.
Theo cast his eyes about the grandiose room, the impressive decor marred by the smoking wreckage of robotic guards. Clearly, someone with no respect for interior design had been this way. However, hanging over the remains of a reception desk, Theo spotted something that took his interest. Bright Paw Industries.
Vending machine offers a variety of villainous beverages, unfortunately not designed to be used by felines. proud and majestic company sign out of place among the debris. Sessionbot, though this robot can't stop panicking, it refuses to abandon its position at the reception desk. That's dedication. Oh, I didn't even see that.
Despite the damage, the underlying class of this Bright Paw establishment was clear. The placement of several large aquariums, brimming with exotic fish, was an inspired design choice that Theo could respect. Theo crossed the room, breathing in the intoxicating fragrance of fish, while taking care to avoid the remaining hazards. As he did, his mind began to wander. Why was a place like this situated beneath his home? And more importantly, why had these fishy treats not been brought to his attention before?
Act 2, Level 5, show floor.
At first glance, it appeared that Theo had stumbled into a storage room for broken glass. Except there were other items in the glittering fragments. Grenades? Missiles? An umbrella?
Classic bomb when it comes down to it. Sometimes bad guys just want the classics. Trick umbrella advertisement. Rain or shine. This is simply the first choice in defense and offense. This undercover weapon will turn heads or remove them and is suitable for formal events.
Welcome to Bright Paw Industries.
Patrol bot, a security robot overly focused on its patrol route. The biggest threat is accidentally being run over.
When the going gets tough, the toughs that unprecedented amounts of energy weapons.
Theo padded behind the guard, pondering his discoveries. A hidden underground facility, robotic security, and now rooms filled with odd weapons. What on earth was this place? Looking back, Theo considered that it was perhaps unwise to leave such destructive toys lying around. On the other hand, there was no way someone would leave live explosives on display. Probably best to ignore it and hurry on.
Act 2, Level 6, boardroom.
Theo contemplated the ruins of the once magnificent boardroom, which had been reduced to little more than burnt mahogany by some kind of explosion. Apparently, the killer had needed to clear the room in a hurry. But why? Oh, perhaps those lasers were a motivator.
These chairs are designed to help establish dominance in a meeting by disposing of undesirable attendees. What Nathaniel might foolishly consider his first real success in life, sealed by a handshake and immortalized in print. Grenade advertisement. Need your enemies to disappear in a hurry? Would you prefer them to be in pieces? Then these are definitely for you. Caution! Good throwing arm not included.
With the wall of death slowly advancing, Theo scrambled for a plan to slip by. There, across the room, a shattered glass wall offering a glimpse of escape. Deftly avoiding glass with his paws, Theo found his eyes drawn to a large portrait on the wall. Was that Nathaniel? As he stood, he wondered, how much of all this was his master responsible for?
Act 3, motive.
Someone had clearly been rifling through the deliveries recently, though they didn't seem to have found what they were looking for.
Ransack crates. A collection of crates turned over in a desperate search. Patrol bot blueprint. A technical specification for a Bright Paw Industries security robot. Surprisingly simple. Box of empty vials. A box torn open and abandoned, leaving the vials within untouched. What could these be for?
Theo had apparently added his name to the waiting list. Obviously, the killer had been looting the facility, and it was unlikely that they planned to use volatile weaponry to spread peace and joy. Being a conscientious cat, Theo knew it fell to him to put a stop to the killer's nefarious activities. Finding himself inside a warehouse, the towering stacks of crates gave Theo some measure of hope. Perhaps the killer would try to search the top of an unstable pile and fall to their doom.
Hefty weapon case. Sadly, none of the weapons of destruction appear to be built with paws in mind. The world can be a very unfair place. Sea mine crate. Something built to sink ships will have no trouble with an overconfident cat. Not for prodding.
Lost in daydreams of the killer being buried alive, Theo stepped blindly forwards onto a conveyor belt, promptly shuffling him away from his happy thoughts. Perhaps it was unlikely that the killer would be ended by fallen cargo. But the belts leading into the dark and deadly machinery seemed to promise an untimely demise. Spotting a bundle under some nearby crates, it appeared Theo's wishes had been heard. However, he tempered his excitement until he could get a closer look.
Looted explosive crate. A tipped over crate that should be filled with explosives but is worryingly empty.
Theo tempered his excitement.
Oh, an empty crate. Very interesting. Close to the definition of scraping the bottom of the barrel.
He didn't lose it. Stepping over a broken belt with great care, he was disappointed to discover not a body, but simply several empty crates bearing the label High Explosive. The empty crates led Theo to conclude three things. The killer had found what they were looking for, They were definitely up to something, and Theo's work was not yet done. He moved on with the hope that the killer's loot would be enough to slow them down.
Activate level 4, take cover.
Theo pondered the erratic crusade of the robots as they fired at non-existent threats. Perhaps the killer had just passed through?
Laserbot. There's something simply wonderful about lasers. Efficient, destructive, and deadly. You know where you are with lasers. Algae container. A specially designed crate used to safely house ominous algae. Mysterious drawing. Lines carefully etched into concrete that vaguely resemble a cat. The determination of the artist excuses their lack of attention to detail.
The belt, unable... Oh
no! Oh, I don't move? Oh, okay, because I'm not on the belt.
The belt, unable to tell the difference between a cat and a crate, and lacking the desire to learn, moved him once again as it would any other box. As he headed for the door, Theo couldn't shake the feeling that the strange blue algae was creeping steadily across the wall behind him. Oh well, it was probably harmless.
Scribbles.
Whoever Theo was following had certainly spooked these poor robots who were all consumed by blind panic.
This crate was developed to hold large amounts of glowing algae. Also functions well as mood lighting. Bizarre series of patterns with no clear meaning, perhaps some kind of code.
As he carefully padded forwards, avoiding lasers, Theo noticed the most curious drawing etched into the wall. But why would a killer stop to doodle? Oh no!
Still not waiting long enough. Heck, I was gonna walk into a laser.
No, 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 no!
If I move first.
Theo couldn't stop thinking about the bizarre graffiti he kept seeing. It was unlikely the killer was taking the time for artistic creativity. Was someone else in the facility?
Still wrong, huh? Vandalism.
As he stepped into the room, Theo found his racing mind halted by yet another drawing of a slightly more significant scale. Theo tried his
A series of rigid geometric lines that seems to take the form of a figure. Who could it be?
best to examine the etching, but found it devoid of artistic value.
A rack of very lethal and very illegal firearms. A bestseller.
A for effort, he supposed.
Where's the...
As he began to move away, Theo couldn't help but wonder who would put so much effort into these acts of vandalism. Was it maybe some kind of poorly drawn calling card? Perhaps, he thought as he carried on, the murderer was simply an awful artist. Whatever it was, the mural failed to hold Theo's interest long enough for any meaning to be gleaned.
AC unit, a modern miracle of air cooling technology, obviously worthy of close attention and study.
According to the booming sounds of heavy industry and the massive shipping containers, Theo had found himself in some kind of loading station.
Cargo container, a very large shipping container, most notable for its size and not for the expensive hardware concealed within. Obvious tie. A bright red necktie deliberately knotted around a railing like a flag. It almost feels too obvious.
Theo's eye was caught by something colourful and clearly out of place hanging from a rail across the room. A discarded tie. Was this some kind of taunt? It was becoming clear to Theo that the large boxes wouldn't just wait for him to cross, so he quickened his pace towards the infuriating clue. Clearly the killer had left this tie to send a message, but in doing so they had left a trail for Theo to follow. Perhaps he'd get the better of them yet. Though he was intrigued by the surprisingly expressive train waiting before him, on the other side of the tracks, a curious hole in the wall drew his eye. Perhaps the killer had made their own exit.
A zero-emission semi-sentient train fueled only by its self-hatred over public transportation. What does it hold? Jewels? Acorns? The gateway to another world? Sadly, due to your indifference, we will never know. I'm aptly telling the railway for those who struggle to remember their stop.
Stepping onto the train, Theo glanced towards his goal and noticed a strangely carefree-looking robot bumbling around near a control panel. Hopefully this one wasn't a threat. The train began to quake, and Theo couldn't react fast enough to leap off. He had better find something to hold on to. Theo was quite unprepared for the sudden velocity and found his current predicament extremely upsetting. Luckily, he just needed to hold on until the train looped back to the station.
Safety conscious bot, a small robot giving it all their a small robot giving it their all in the name of fire suppression. can't go there.
rocketed past him, Theo pressed himself against the train and vowed to dedicate the rest of the ride to keeping his eyes open for low-flying objects of feline destruction. Theo might have found some comfort knowing he wasn't the only one caught unaware by the sudden departure. But it was all he could do to just keep his paws on the ground.
See, it's hard to tell if this robot can feel pain. Does it even know it's on fire? Theo tried not to let the burning robot distract him from his efforts to survive. In the distance, Theo could just about spot the station, approaching at a rapid pace. He just hoped to hold on a little longer. Theo staggered off the train quickly, driven by his newfound appreciation for solid ground and the terrible fear that it might suddenly set off again. A complex control panel that had clearly been tampered with.
Just ahead of him, he could see that bloody robot that had sent the train off in the first place. he followed the irritating machine through the jagged opening in the wall, Theo hoped that he wouldn't ever have to lay eyes on it again. Theo eyed his new surroundings curiously, noting the piles of unused tiles and pipes. Across what little floor existed, there was a sharp drop, from which a blinding light and tremendous heat emanated. Beside this abyss sat... that bloody robot.
These stacks of materials are most likely intended for construction purposes. A busy little drone making sure the power is in the right place, hopefully at the right time.
Theo firmly averted his eyes from the robot and simply pretended that it did not exist. Theo focused on the path ahead, choosing to politely ignore the annoyance in the room. A shifting wall of energy was barring his progress. Perhaps turning off that strange machine would help.
Use R to select the power toggle and A to flip it.
With the barrier successfully disabled, Theo was happy to move on and leave that robotic liability behind. Surely the killer couldn't be too far now. Entering another area with limited flooring, Theo wondered why all of these rooms seemed so unfinished. Maybe the... It was starting to look like Theo might have a tail. No pun intended.
Ramshackle wall. A wall made of garbage and I-beams. Board robots aren't the best architects, it seems. I don't have many choices.
Oh, apparently Theo's new friend had some value after all. Caution was probably wise, but there seemed to be no other way. As the oblivious robot scampered over an obvious switch, Theo braced for the consequences. When none presented themselves, he decided to stay on alert. There was no way he was safe while that machine was bumping into things. Contemplating the state of the room ahead, Theo reluctantly accepted that perhaps the robot's help might be necessary.
Alright, why don't we stop it there? This is Autopostrophe. You've been watching Bright Paw on Nintendo Switch. I really like it. It's a very, very clever game. I'm not really even sure why there are these movement cards. Maybe the challenge is in doing the entire game without rewinding, which obviously I would fail at that challenge. But despite that, it's very cleverly written. It runs really well. So far, I really like the narrator. Does a great job of presenting emotion, for characters that don't have emotion. And I'm having a good time. So yeah, check it out for yourself. This is a really good, surprisingly, or a really good surprise, considering I wasn't expecting anything going into this game. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.